Alright everybody, hey there, it's Oliver. I'm in the basement, very messy basement, and today I'm going to be building a breakfast in bed desk. So yeah, basically what it's going to be is 12 by 16 and a half or so, and then we're going to have a little bit of a lip up top and a bit of a lip on the bottom, about 1 inch on the bottom, so that the legs can swing out, and the legs are going to swing out at about a 110-degree angle or so. Alright, so here's what I'm at so far. I basically took this 5/8 inch good on one side piece of plywood, cut it down. I'll put the dimensions up on the screen right now. And then I had this scrap piece of wood. I've already sanded most of it down. I screwed this up from clamping it too hard. Sanded most of it down, clamped it together with 36-inch clamps, some very big clamps that I bought today. And on the bottom here, it goes all the way around, so there's a nice lip on the bottom here, and I'm going to try and secure in some swinging legs on both sides here, and that's the next step of the process. Just going to use some more scrap wood, just like these were some scrap wood, and then I cut those down to size on the miter saw, and yeah. So this was table saw, this was table saw, and cutting this down to size was miter saw. Next in the building process is to create the legs. I decided to make the legs 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch by 7.5 inch and made them the appropriate size using some more scrap wood, the table saw, and the miter saw. Once I had 4 legs, I then got to work cutting out some divots about 3/8 of an inch deep in order to secure another piece of wood to add some stability to the legs. Next, I got to marking the appropriate spot to drill my 3/8 inch hole on the drill press in order to feed a dowel through the legs. I placed the hole in the center of the leg and then measured the same distance from the top of the leg. Initially, I had wanted to use the dowels as my pivot point, but I made a mistake in gluing the frame together too early. But I had already bought the dowel, so I decided that I would make the holes anyway to create the illusion that the dowels are still my pivot points. If I was to do this again, and I likely will since this one's a gift and I really liked it, I would have to make sure that to drill the holes into the frame on the drill press and glue the legs and the frame together all at once. And as my replacement pivot points, I decided to use some small nails that hid nicely in the wood, as you will see later. Luckily for me, everything worked out. Next, I worked on sizing the crosspiece for the legs to prepare the legs for gluing. I wanted to make sure that this piece would be very snug, so using the frame and putting the legs inside the frame allowed me to make sure that I was cutting the pieces down to a good size that would fit the way I wanted. However, even with all the precautions, I had to fit a small wood chip into one of the legs as I was gluing because I accidentally cut it too small. I also had to sand down the legs so that they could rotate around the frame. Just to make sure I had done everything correctly, I did a few test fits of the dowel, and it fit just as expected. So I got to gluing that together. I found that the best way to clamp the legs together was to use the frame as my clamp, and that allowed me to see if the legs were as snug as I needed. If the legs are snug against the frame, they won't fall out on their own, and you'll be able to store the desk however you wish. So this is what I would recommend doing as well. I also recommend sanding it down a lot because you don't want splinters in bed. Once everything had been glued, I decided that it was time to put on the first coat of stain. The stain that I used was Minwax Early American. The Colonial American was in French. If you wanted the lighter brown color like it shows on the package, I think 1 coat would have sufficed with some primer. But I wanted a bolder color, so I went with 2 coats. Usually, I would use some primer before putting on the stain, which would allow the wood to absorb the stain a lot better. But unfortunately, I didn't have any primer, so I resorted to coating it twice, and it turned out okay. I would also usually recommend using some type of rag to stain the wood, but I got lazy and picked up the nearest paintbrush. I found that the best way to get coverage without leaving too much stain was to just dip the edge of the brush and get a small streak of stain on the wood, then work on spreading it around and repeat. I really like the way the color turned out, and I would recommend it to those of you who are curious. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is a present, and I wanted to give it some kind of personal touch, and you can do this too. I went to Home Depot and picked up a wood burning kit, and then I found a nice font online and I decided to try and burn it into the wood. I recommend doing some practice runs first on some scrap wood. In order to get the outline of the letters onto the piece of wood you are working with, you can use carbon transfer paper. Place it underneath, tape the paper, and then trace the letters that you printed. But if you don't have that, you can simply cover the backside of the paper using a graphite pencil and then trace those letters, and it will have a similar effect. I found the letters somewhat hard to see because of the stain, so I kept the original paper close by and parallel to the wood piece in order to be my secondary guide. This way I knew I was properly in line. I decided to use a calligraphy tip because it gives the letters a bit of a fancy look. And once I had completed my little message, I found a small clip art of a coffee cup online and print that into the wood as well. It's a good idea to do this type of thing in a well-ventilated environment because the fumes coming off the wood are not something that you want to be breathing a lot of. If you find that the burning tip stops being as effective, all you have to do is grab some sandpaper, 150 grit, wipe off the residue, and you're good to go. Now skipping ahead a bit in time here, I have applied the second coat on top of the wood burning, turned out to look pretty good. Then I decided to add 2 coats of clear satin lacquer, using the same method as I did with the stain, and sanding between each coat. Once the coverage was done, the table was looking ready to go. In order to fasten the legs, I pre-drilled some small holes in the wood and in the dowels, and then I did my best to align them while hammering in the nails covered with wood glue to give it some extra security. And there you have it, folks. That is the completed breakfast in bed or laptop tray or whatever you want to use it for. Makes a great present. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like and share with someone who you think would find this interesting. Don't forget to subscribe and leave me a comment about what you thought or how I can improve. Have a wonderful day.